Imagine a world with no sight and no sound. A world where even a warm hand or the smell of a flower feels like a mystery. This is the real story of a young girl who turned that deep silence and darkness into a life full of light. Welcome. You're about to listen to a short and easy version of Helen Keller's The Story of My Life. In 20 chapters, we will walk with Helen from her childhood to the day she discovered language, to the books, friends, and courage that shaped her life. Every chapter is told in simple, friendly words so you can enjoy her journey step by step. The struggles, the victories, and the quiet joys. This recording is made for Oklistening. Tip: for the best experience, try listening with headphones. And if you enjoy this audiobook, please subscribe to Oklistening for more authentic English audiobooks. Now, let's begin Helen's amazing journey. I was born on June 27, 1880, in a small town called Tuscumbia, Alabama. My father, Captain Arthur Keller, had served in the army, and my mother, Kate, was a loving and gentle woman. Ours was a simple, happy household. We lived in a plain white house that people later called Ivy Green because of the ivy that climbed along its walls. In those early days, my life was full of light, sound, and warmth. My parents often told me that I was a bright and lively baby. They said I loved to laugh, play with my toys, and follow my mother around the house. I would reach out for anything new, and my curious little hands wanted to touch everything within sight. My father used to say that my eyes sparkled with questions. I had no way of knowing then that life was going to change so suddenly. But before the illness came, I was just like any other child. Innocent, playful, and full of joy. I remember hearing my father's deep voice and my mother's soft songs. I remember the garden full of roses, the smell of fresh grass, and the cool water from the well. These early memories stayed with me, even when later I could no longer see or hear. Our family home was not grand, but it was full of love. I had a younger sister, Mildred, who came later, and we spent many happy moments together as children. My father was often busy with work, but he cared deeply for us. My mother gave me most of her time, watching over me and smiling at my every little action. She loved reading and would sit with her books by the window. Sometimes she would lift me into her lap and read aloud, though I was too young to understand the words. I loved the sound of her voice and the rhythm of her speech. Those first months of life were a time of discovery for me. I crawled, walked, and learned to explore the world around me. Everyone in the family was proud of my progress. No one could imagine that within just a few months, I would lose the very senses that made these discoveries possible. One of my favorite places was the big garden outside our home. Ivy Green had tall trees that gave shade in the hot summer, and flowers that bloomed in bright colors. I would often crawl toward the garden, where my mother or a nurse would carry me among the roses and violets. I loved touching the petals and feeling their softness. The sound of birds singing filled the air. Though I would later lose my hearing, I believe these songs of birds remain somewhere deep in my memory, like echoes from a happier time. Family friends often visited our home. They would smile at me, lift me up, and call me a cheerful baby. My laughter filled the rooms, and people often said I would grow into a lively and intelligent child. My parents had high hopes for me. They believed I would have a bright future. None of us knew then how different my path would become. As I look back, those early days remind me of how precious simple joys can be. The love of a family, the warmth of a home, the beauty of nature. All of these gave me a strong foundation. They gave me memories to hold on to during the darker times that came later. At the time, I did not know how important those first experiences would be, but when blindness and deafness came, it was those memories of light, sound, and love that kept me strong. I had known what it meant to see a flower, to hear a voice, and to feel sunlight on my face. And because I once had them, I longed to find a way back to them again, even if only through touch and imagination. That was the beginning of my story, a happy, bright beginning in a loving home. It was a childhood filled with smiles and hope, until the day when illness arrived and everything changed. But for now, let us hold on to the picture of that little girl in her garden, laughing under the sun, with a future yet to be written. When I was 19 months old, something happened that changed my life forever. I became very sick. No one knew exactly what it was. Some said it was scarlet fever. Others thought it was meningitis. In those days, doctors did not always have clear answers. My family only knew that I was burning with fever and fighting for my life. For many days, my mother and father stayed by my bedside. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she held my small hand, praying I would recover. My father paced the floor, helpless but strong for the family. Everyone feared I might not survive, but one morning the fever broke. I slowly opened my eyes and breathed more easily. My parents rejoiced. They thought the danger had passed. In one way, they were right. I lived. But in another way, everything had changed. Slowly, my parents realized something was wrong. When they clapped their hands or called my name, I did not respond. When the sun shone brightly into the room, I did not blink or follow the light. The illness had taken away both my hearing and my sight. At first, no one wanted to believe it. My mother would wave her hand in front of my eyes. My father would call me loudly, but I did not turn. I was lost in a world without sound or sight. Imagine being a child who cannot see the smile of her mother, cannot hear the voice of her father, and cannot understand why the world has suddenly gone silent and dark. That was my world. I was alive, but in a deep prison I could not describe. As the months passed, my family had to accept the truth. Their cheerful baby had changed. I grew restless, often angry, because I could not make sense of what was happening around me. I wanted to communicate, but I had no words. I wanted to understand, but I had no way to connect. I invented signs of my own. For example, when I wanted my mother, I would pull at her clothes. If I wanted ice cream, I pretended to churn it with my hands. When I was thirsty, I mimed drinking from a cup. My family learned these signs, and in that way, we managed a little, but it was not enough. I often felt trapped inside my own body, like a bird in a cage. The hardest moments came when I saw other children speaking, laughing, and playing. I knew they were communicating in a way I could not. It filled me with sadness and sometimes with rage. I would throw myself to the floor in frustration, kicking and screaming. My poor mother tried to comfort me, but she could not give me the key I needed most, the gift of language. I became very strong-willed, some might say spoiled, for my parents found it hard to discipline me. They pitied me so much that they gave in to my demands. I would often get what I wanted by storming or pushing. Deep inside, though, I was not simply naughty. I was desperate. I wanted to express myself, but I had no way to do it. Life at home became more and more difficult. My family loved me dearly, but they worried about my future. What kind of life could I have without sight and hearing? Was there any hope that I might learn to communicate like other children? These questions filled their minds day and night. Still, not everything was sad. My family never abandoned me. My mother, especially, refused to give up. She kept searching for answers. She read books and articles about other blind or deaf people who had been taught. She believed there must be a way for me, too. Meanwhile, I found comfort in the natural world. I loved to feel the warm sun on my face, the cool grass under my feet, and the shape of flowers between my fingers. I could not see or hear, but my hands became my eyes and my ears. I touched everything I could reach. My hands learned to know the world. Even so, without words, I lived in confusion. I had thoughts and feelings, but no way to share them fully. Imagine being filled with ideas, but unable to say them. Imagine wanting to love, but not knowing how to show it. That was my struggle every single day. Looking back, I realized those were the darkest years of my life. The sickness had taken so much from me, but it had not taken away my spirit. Deep inside, I still longed for light. I still wanted to learn, to grow, and to understand. I just needed someone to guide me, someone with patience, wisdom, and love. That guide was soon to come. My mother's hope would lead her to find help, and that guide was soon to come. My mother's hope would lead her to find help, and that help would come in the form of a young teacher named Anne Sullivan. She would unlock the door to my silent prison and give me the gift of language. But at this point in my story, I was still a small child, lost, lonely, and waiting for a miracle. Those were the years of darkness. But sometimes, even in darkness, a light begins to shine far away, leading us to hope. My light was drawing near. After my illness, I entered a world that was silent and dark. I had no words, no sentences, and no way to explain what I felt. Imagine being filled with emotions but unable to tell anyone. That was my daily struggle. I was a child who wanted to explore, but I could not see what was in front of me. I was a child who wanted to listen, but no sound reached my ears. All I had were my hands, my sense of touch, and my strong will. My family tried to make life easier for me. My mother was patient and loving. She guided me when I stumbled, hugged me when I cried, and tried to guess what I wanted. My father, though busy, cared for me deeply and worried about my future. My younger sister, Mildred, was too little to understand me, but even she became part of my small world. To communicate, I created simple signs. I shook my head for no, nodded for yes, and acted out things I wanted. For bread, I pretended to slice. For milk, I moved my hand as if milking a cow. My family learned these signs and responded, but it was never enough. Inside me, thoughts were growing. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to know why things happened, why the sun was warm, why my sister laughed, why my mother read books. But all I could do was pull at clothes, cry in frustration, or stamp my feet. Without words, the world felt closed, like a locked door. My anger often frightened others. I was known for throwing tantrums. When I could not express myself, I would scream, kick, or even strike. Some people might have thought I was wild or spoiled, but really, I was a prisoner, trapped inside my own silence. And yet I was not hopeless. My hands became my greatest teachers. They touched everything: furniture, toys, plants, the faces of my family. I learned that faces changed when people were happy or sad, because my fingers could feel the difference in their expressions. I learned about objects by feeling their shape and size. I learned about warmth by holding a cup of tea, and about softness by stroking a kitten. The natural world was my playground. I loved to wander in the garden at Ivy Green. I knew the path by heart, every step and turn. I felt the ivy on the walls, the roses in bloom, and the leaves rustling in the breeze. I pressed my hands into the earth and felt its coolness. I lay on the grass, letting the sun warm my face. I could not see or hear nature, but I could feel it. Nature spoke to me through touch. Still, the longing for words grew inside me. Sometimes I felt the vibrations of my family talking. I pressed my fingers to their lips or throats, trying to understand what they were doing. I knew they had a secret power, language. They could share thoughts with each other. While I was left out, it made me feel lonely and separate, even in a house full of love. One memory stays with me. My mother was reading aloud to my father one evening. I could not hear the words, but I felt the movement of her lips as I touched her face. I realized she was saying something meaningful, but I could not enter that world. I began to weep, burying my face in her dress. That night, I longed more than ever for a way to speak and understand. My mother's heart ached for me. She searched for answers, reading about schools for the blind and deaf. She found stories of children like me who had been taught to communicate. These gave her hope. My father supported her, though he sometimes doubted. Could such a miracle really happen for their little girl in Tuscumbia? Meanwhile, my behavior grew more difficult. Without a guide, I was like a ship without a rudder. I had intelligence but no way to direct it. My family often felt helpless. They loved me, but they could not give me the key I needed. At the same time, I was becoming aware of myself. I knew I was different. I knew others had something I lacked. I sensed their laughter, their whispers, their songs, things I could neither see nor hear. That knowledge hurt me, but it also pushed me to search. I did not know it then, but deep inside, I was waiting for someone who would bring me words, open the locked door, and set me free. The waiting years were not wasted. Though I had no formal language, I was learning to observe with my hands. I was building a memory of the world through touch and smell. I was learning patience through frustration. I was gaining strength through my struggles. All these would later help me when my teacher came. Looking back, those wordless years were both painful and necessary. They taught me the value of communication. Because I had once lived without words, I would later treasure them more deeply. I would never take a single word for granted, because I knew what life was without them. So I lived in a world without words, lonely, frustrated, but still filled with curiosity and longing. My family prayed for help, and one day, that help finally arrived. A young woman named Anne Sullivan came to our home. She carried with her the gift of patience, love, and a method that would change everything. The silent years were ending. The miracle of language was about to begin. Life had been dark and silent for so long, but my mother never gave up hope. She believed that I could learn, that I could communicate, that I could be like other children. If only someone could show me how. Her determination led her to a discovery that would change my life forever. She found the Perkins Institute for the Blind, a school in Boston known for teaching children who were blind or deaf. At the institute, she learned about a young teacher named Anne Sullivan. Miss Sullivan was only 20 years old, but she was wise, patient, and filled with compassion. My mother knew instantly that this young woman might be the one to open the door to my world. In 1887, Anne Sullivan arrived at Ivy Green. I remember the first day clearly. She was small and strong, with a serious face and sharp eyes. but there was something gentle about her, a warmth that reached me even in my dark and silent world. My mother introduced her, and I felt an immediate curiosity. Who was this person, and why had she come to me? Anne did not speak to me at first, because she knew I could not hear. She used her hands, touching my fingers, my arms, and my face. At first I did not understand. She moved my hands over objects, spelling words into my palm with her fingers. I was confused, angry, and resistant. I did not know what she wanted from me. The first few days were filled with struggle. I pulled away, cried, and sometimes struck out in frustration. It was difficult to trust someone new, but Anne was patient. She did not give up. She stayed by my side, repeating the same motions again and again. She treated me as if I were capable, even when I was stubborn and wild. Slowly I began to sense that she wanted to teach me something important. Then came the day at the water pump, the moment that changed everything. Anne held my hand under the flowing water and spelled the word W-A-T-E-R into my other hand. At first it was just a series of motions, but then suddenly I understood. The cool flowing water had a name. The word spelled into my hand represented the very thing I was touching. My heart leapt with joy. I had learned my first word. That moment was like a door opening in my mind. Suddenly the world was not so dark. Words existed. I could connect the objects I felt with the signs she spelled into my hand. From that day on, I wanted to learn more. I wanted to know the names of everything in the house, the garden, and the world around me. Anne became more than a teacher. She became my guide, my friend, my partner in discovery. She taught me to spell, to understand, and eventually to read and write. Every day, I practiced, sometimes growing frustrated when I could not remember a word. But Anne never gave up on me, and soon I began to see the world in a new way. Through Anne, I learned more than language. I learned patience, perseverance, and the power of love. She showed me that even in darkness, there could be light. She taught me that the mind can conquer obstacles when guided by kindness and determination. At home, my family watched the miracle unfold. My mother's face would glow with pride as I spelled a new word correctly. My father would smile, sometimes shaking his head in disbelief at my progress. My younger sister Mildred began to understand that I was learning, and we started to share a bond through these new signs and words. Those early lessons were not easy. I had to learn discipline. I had to follow rules. I had to practice every day. Sometimes I wanted to give up, to retreat into my old world of silence and darkness. But Anne's presence gave me courage. Her steady hands guided mine. Her patient eyes encouraged me, and her unwavering belief in me pushed me forward. I began to feel hope, real hope, for the first time in my life. I could imagine a future where I could read, write, and even speak. I could imagine a life where I could share my thoughts and feelings with others. The world of darkness was still around me, but now there was a door, and Anne held the key. From that day on, learning became my greatest joy. Each word I learned was a small victory. Each sentence I spelled was a step toward freedom. And through it all, I discovered the most important lesson of all. No matter how impossible a situation may seem, patience, love, and guidance can turn despair into hope. This was only the beginning of my journey. The door to hope had opened, and I stepped through it, ready to explore a world I had never known. A world of words, ideas, and endless possibilities. And so, my adventure with Anne Sullivan began. The adventure that would change my life forever. The day Anne Sullivan truly became my teacher was one I will never forget. Though she had arrived a little while before, it was on this day that our real work began. the work that would change my life forever. Anne was small but very strong. Her eyes were sharp and alert, and her hands were full of energy and patience. She did not treat me as a helpless child. Instead, she looked at me as if she knew I could learn, if only I tried. At first, I was stubborn. I had lived for almost 2 years in a world without sight or sound, and I had learned to get by, using my own signs and actions. I did not understand why anyone needed to teach me anything new. I would pull away, cry, or strike out, but Anne did not give up. She had a way of calming me with her gentle touch and steady hands. Anne introduced me to a method called finger spelling. She spelled words into the palm of my hand. At first, it was just a series of letters that I could not connect to anything I knew. But Anne was patient. She repeated the letters over and over, while showing me the objects they represented. Slowly, I began to understand. I remember the first time I understood a word clearly. We were at the water pump. Anne held my hand under the cool water and spelled W-A-T-E-R into my other hand. Suddenly, I understood. The letters meant the water flowing over my hand. That single moment changed everything. I realized that the world had names, and I could learn them. I could communicate. From that day on, I was eager to learn. I wanted to know the names of everything in the house, the garden, and even outside the walls. Anne taught me words for doors, chairs, flowers, and animals. Every word opened up a new part of the world for me. I could understand things in ways I had never dreamed possible. At first, learning was not easy. Sometimes I grew frustrated and wanted to give up. I would cry or throw tantrums when a word seemed too difficult to remember. But Anne never gave up on me. She would calmly repeat the letters, guiding my hands and encouraging me with her smile. Her patience was endless, and her belief in me made me try harder. Anne also taught me how to read and write. We used books with raised letters that I could feel with my fingers. Slowly, I began to understand sentences. I could read stories about people, animals, and faraway places. I loved books and the new worlds they opened to me. The bond between Anne and me grew stronger each day. She was more than a teacher. She became my friend, my guide, and my partner in learning. I trusted her completely, and she trusted me. Together, we discovered that I could learn, grow, and even succeed in ways that no one had imagined before. Anne's teaching was not only about words. She taught me discipline, patience, and courage. She showed me that learning required effort and persistence. She also showed me the joy that comes from understanding, from connecting with the world, and from expressing yourself. My family watched in amazement as I progressed. My mother was proud and joyful, often smiling and wiping tears as I spelled a new word. My father sometimes shook his head in disbelief at the speed of my learning. Even my little sister, Mildred, began to notice the changes. I was no longer trapped in silence and darkness. I was learning to be a part of the world around me. Through Anne, I discovered something more important than words. I discovered that nothing is impossible if someone believes in you and helps guide you. That lesson stayed with me forever. Meeting Anne Sullivan was the beginning of a new life for me. She opened the door to learning, to communication, and to joy. The silent, dark world I had lived in for so long was slowly changing. I was beginning to understand the world, and more importantly, I was beginning to understand myself. From that day on, every moment with Anne was a chance to grow. Every word, every letter, every new lesson was a step forward. Together we would travel a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and discoveries. And through it all, Anne's patience, guidance, and love made it possible for me to step into a life I had once only dreamed of. Meeting my teacher was the first step toward freedom. The door to my world had been unlocked, and I was ready to step through. One of the most important moments in my life happened at the water pump. It was a warm spring day, and Anne Sullivan was determined to teach me something that would change everything. I did not know it at the time, but this day would mark the beginning of my real understanding of language. Anne held my hand under the flowing water and began to spell letters into my other hand. She repeated the letters slowly, clearly, and patiently. W-A-T-E-R. At first, the letters meant nothing to me. They were just shapes, motions of her fingers. But then something incredible happened. I felt the cool water running over my hand, and I realized the letters she was spelling represented the very thing I was touching. It was a sudden, joyful understanding. My mind seemed to open like a flower in sunlight. The water had a name. The word spelled into my hand was connected to the object I could feel. I wanted to shout, to dance, to express my happiness, but I could not speak or make sound. Instead, I pressed my hands together in excitement, and Anne smiled at me, understanding exactly what had happened. From that moment, my world changed. Words became real. They were no longer just strange motions on my hand. They were keys to understanding everything around me. I could now connect objects, ideas, and people with their names. I felt a joy I had never known before. I wanted to learn every word, every name, every meaning I could reach. After the water pump, Anne taught me words for every object in the house and garden. She showed me doors, chairs, tables, flowers, animals, and even clothing. Each word I learned was a small victory, a step out of the dark and into the light. Every new word made me feel more powerful, more alive, more connected to the world around me. Learning was not easy at first. Sometimes I grew frustrated when I could not remember a word, or when the letters seemed confusing. I would cry, throw myself down, or stamp my feet. But Anne's patience never wavered. She repeated the letters, guided my hands, and encouraged me gently. She never scolded me, never gave up on me, and never let me feel that I was incapable. I quickly realized that language was not just about naming objects. It was about understanding ideas, sharing thoughts, and connecting with people. With each new word, I felt a new part of the world open to me. I could now ask for things I wanted, express feelings I had, and even tell others what I was thinking. The miracle of water taught me more than the word itself. It taught me the joy of discovery, the excitement of learning, and the power of human patience and guidance. I began to understand that knowledge could free me, and that learning was a path to freedom and happiness. At home, my family watched in amazement. My mother's eyes would shine with pride as I spelled a new word correctly. My father would smile quietly, sometimes shaking his head at my progress. Even my little sister Mildred began to understand that I was no longer the helpless child I had been. I was learning, growing, and becoming part of the world again. After this breakthrough, I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to know the names of flowers in the garden, the animals I could touch, the rooms in the house, and the tools my father used. I asked Anne to spell everything into my hand. Each new word was like a tiny treasure. I learned to spell short sentences and then longer ones. Soon I could write simple notes to my family and communicate more clearly than I ever had before. The miracle of water also taught me the importance of persistence. Without Anne's patient guidance, I might never have connected letters with objects. Without my desire to understand, I might have given up. It was the combination of her teaching and my determination that made the miracle possible. From that day on, my world was never the same. The dark silence had begun to lift, replaced by a universe full of words, meanings, and connections. I discovered the power of language, not just to know, but to think, imagine, and create. Every day brought new discoveries, new words, new joys. Looking back, I realized that the water pump moment was more than a lesson in language. It was a lesson in hope. It showed me that even the deepest darkness could be broken. Even the hardest obstacles could be overcome, and that patience, love, and guidance could change a life forever. From that day forward, I eagerly awaited each lesson with Anne. I touched, felt, learned, and grew. Every day was an adventure. The world was no longer closed to me. Words were the key, and the key had finally been placed in my hands. The miracle of water was just the beginning. It unlocked a door, opened my mind, and taught me that learning could be joyful, exciting, and full of wonder. It was a moment I would never forget, and it marked the true start of my journey into the world of knowledge, communication, and understanding. After the miracle at the water pump, my life began to change more quickly. Words were no longer mysterious. They were real, meaningful, and exciting. Anne Sullivan had shown me the power of language, and now it was time to explore it more deeply. She taught me to speak using my hands, and through this I could finally share my thoughts with the world. Anne used a method called finger spelling. She spelled words into the palm of my hand. At first it was slow and confusing, but I was determined to understand. Every object I touched, every action I wanted to describe, became a lesson. I felt the shape of objects and matched them with the letters she spelled. Step by step, my world became clearer. At first, I could spell simple words: M-O-T-H-E-R, F-A-T-H-E-R, W-A-T-E-R, and F-L-O-W-E-R. Each word I learned was like opening a window in the dark room I had lived in. The letters became more than shapes. They became a bridge to understanding, a way to communicate, and a source of joy. Anne was patient. Sometimes I would grow frustrated. I would pull my hands away, cry, or refuse to cooperate. But Anne never scolded me. She would gently place my hands back in hers, guiding me letter by letter. She believed in me when I doubted myself. She encouraged me with her smile, her calm voice, and her quiet confidence. Soon I learned to spell more complex words. I could ask for food, describe my surroundings, and even express my feelings. I am happy. I am tired. I want to play. These phrases were small victories that opened my world. For the first time, I could tell others what I was thinking, and it was a magical feeling. At home, my family began to notice my progress. My mother was delighted. My father smiled quietly, amazed by my rapid learning. My little sister, Mildred, began to understand me better, and I even learned to spell simple words to communicate with me. Slowly, our home became a place of shared understanding, not just love. Learning to speak with my hands was more than just communication. It was freedom. For the first time, I could direct my thoughts, ask questions, and learn answers. I was no longer trapped in the dark, silent world of my early years. I could explore ideas, understand instructions, and participate in family life. Anne also encouraged me to read. She brought raised letter books, which I could feel with my fingers. Each page was full of new words, new ideas, and new stories. I loved the feeling of moving my fingers across the raised letters, connecting them with the words I had learned through finger spelling. Reading became another doorway to knowledge, imagination, and joy. We practiced every day. Morning, afternoon, and sometimes evening, Anne and I would sit together, learning new words, reviewing old ones, and discovering the beauty of communication. It was hard work, but it was exciting. I loved every moment of it. I wanted to learn as much as I could, as quickly as I could. One day Anne took me on a small walk around the garden. She spelled the names of flowers, trees, and animals into my hand. I felt the petals of roses, the rough bark of trees, and the softness of a kitten. With each word, I understood more about the world. I felt connected, alive, and full of curiosity. Learning with my hands also taught me patience and discipline. Sometimes mistakes were frustrating. Sometimes words were hard to remember. But Anne encouraged me to keep trying. She showed me that progress comes from effort, repetition, and belief in oneself. I learned that giving up was never the answer, and that persistence could overcome almost anything. Through finger spelling, I discovered a new sense of independence. I could ask for what I wanted. I could tell Anne what I needed. I could even talk to my family without depending on guesswork or acting out. My hands had become my voice, and my mind was free to think, imagine, and create. The more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. I began to understand that words were more than tools for survival. They were keys to knowledge, imagination, and connection. I could think about ideas, ask questions, and even share stories. I was no longer a silent, helpless child. I was growing into a thinker, a learner, and a person capable of understanding the world. Anne Sullivan had opened the door to a new life. She had shown me that even the most difficult obstacles could be overcome with patience, love, and hard work. My hands became my voice, and through them I discovered the joy of language, the power of learning, and the thrill of sharing my thoughts. That was only the beginning. Every day brought new words, new lessons, and new adventures. I was no longer trapped in darkness and silence. I was part of a world full of ideas, beauty, and human connection. Learning to speak with my hands taught me a lesson I would carry forever. No matter how impossible a challenge may seem, determination, guidance, and love can make it possible. Words were my first victory, but they were only the start of a life filled with learning, discovery, and joy. After I had learned to speak with my hands, Anne Sullivan introduced me to reading and writing. These lessons opened yet another door in my life, one that led to knowledge, imagination, and independence. Anne brought me books with raised letters. I could feel each letter with my fingers moving across the page slowly and carefully. At first, it was difficult to recognize letters in sequence. Each word seemed like a puzzle, and each sentence was a challenge. But I was determined. I wanted to learn, to know, to explore this new world. Anne's method was patient and thorough. She would guide my fingers over the letters while spelling the words into my hand. B-O-O-K, she spelled, and then I traced the same letters on the page. Slowly the letters began to form meaning. I realized that they were symbols representing objects, actions, and ideas. Just like the fingerspelling I had learned before. Reading was exciting because it allowed me to learn about places I had never been, people I had never met, and ideas I had never imagined. I felt as though each book was a new world waiting to be explored. Even though I could not hear or see, I could feel the story through my fingers. I could imagine the sounds, the colors, and the actions in my mind. Writing came next. Anne taught me to write letters with a pencil, and later to write sentences. My first attempts were slow and awkward. I would press too hard or not hard enough. Sometimes my letters were crooked or uneven, but Anne encouraged me, guiding my hand and praising my efforts. I learned that mistakes were part of learning, and that persistence was more important than perfection. Through reading and writing, I began to express my thoughts more clearly. I could describe what I had seen, what I had felt, and what I had imagined. I could ask questions, record answers, and even tell stories. Writing became a way to share my ideas with others and to understand the world. more deeply myself, one of the most exciting parts of learning to read and write was the realization that I could now communicate with more people, not just through finger spelling. I could send notes, keep a diary, and record my thoughts. I felt a sense of independence I had never known before. I was no longer entirely dependent on others to understand or help me. Anne also encouraged me to explore books beyond the basic lessons. She introduced me to poetry, stories, and histories. I felt the words come alive under my fingers. I could see the characters, hear the events, and imagine the scenes. Even without sight or hearing, I was part of these worlds. At home, my family was amazed at my progress. My mother would read aloud to my father, while I followed along with my fingers. I could understand every word, every sentence. My father sometimes shook his head in wonder at how quickly I learned. Even my little sister Mildred began to enjoy listening to me read by tracing letters on her hand. Learning to read and write also taught me discipline. I had to practice every day. I had to pay attention to details and repeat lessons until I understood them fully. Anne guided me patiently, showing me that learning was a process and that effort and patience were the keys to success. As I continued learning, I realized that language was no longer just a tool for survival. It was a key to knowledge, imagination, and creativity. Reading and writing allowed me to explore ideas, solve problems, and connect with people in ways I had never dreamed possible. Through these lessons, I also discovered the joy of learning itself. Every new word, every sentence, every story was a small triumph. I felt proud of my progress and excited for the future. I knew that there were endless possibilities ahead, as long as I continued to work and learn. Anne's teaching showed me that no obstacle is too great when someone believes in you and guides you with patience and love. Through reading and writing, I discovered my own strength, my curiosity, and my ability to understand and express myself. The first lessons in reading and writing were only the beginning. They laid the foundation for all the knowledge I would gain in the years to come. They gave me the tools to explore the world, to share my ideas, and to continue the journey that began at the water pump. I felt a new sense of freedom, a new sense of power. The silent, dark world of my early years was fading. Words, letters, and stories became my companions, guiding me toward understanding, joy, and a life filled with possibilities. And so, with Anne Sullivan by my side, I began the next chapter of my journey. A chapter filled with letters, books, stories, and endless discovery. After I had begun reading and writing, my world grew bigger and brighter every day. Words had become my eyes and ears. Through them, I could explore ideas, nature, and people in ways I had never imagined before. Anne Sullivan guided me through this exciting journey, helping me understand the world around me. I began with simple observations at home. I learned the names of every room, every piece of furniture, and every object I touched. The kitchen had spoons, plates, and bowls, all with names. The garden had flowers, trees, and herbs, all with letters spelling their identity into my hands. Even the family pets had names I could now spell. Everything I touched had meaning. As my vocabulary grew, so did my curiosity. I wanted to know not just what things were, but why they existed and how they worked. Anne encouraged me to ask questions and explore answers through reading and writing. If I wondered why the sun was warm or how rain fell, I could find answers in books. If I wanted to know why birds sang, I could imagine it from the words I read. Language allowed me to reach beyond my small home into the larger world. One of my favorite activities was walking in the garden with Anne. She would spell the names of flowers, insects, and animals into my hand. I could feel the roughness of a tree trunk, the softness of a petal, or the delicate wings of a butterfly. Through words, I learned that everything had a story. The world was full of life, and I could understand it piece by piece. I also learned about people. Before, I had only known my family. Now I could understand visitors, neighbors, and friends through reading letters, books, and by feeling finger-spelled conversations. I could learn about their thoughts, their actions, and their feelings. I began to understand that every person had a story, and words were the bridge to that story. Through Anne's guidance, I also discovered history and geography. I learned about faraway lands, great events, and famous people. I could feel the letters and imagine the scenes: kings and queens, battles and inventions, mountains, rivers, and oceans. Even though I could not see or hear these things, I could understand them through language. Reading about nature was particularly exciting. I could explore forests, rivers, and deserts through the pages of a book. I could imagine the sound of a waterfall, the touch of sand, and the warmth of sunlight. Language became a way to experience the world without needing sight or hearing. I also began to understand emotions more deeply. Words allowed me to recognize happiness, sadness, fear, and love. I could describe my own feelings and understand the feelings of others. I learned that people are connected not just by touch, but by shared experiences and ideas. Words were the invisible thread weaving us all together. At home, my family marveled at my progress. My mother would often read stories aloud while I traced the letters with my fingers. My father would ask questions, and I could answer them with finger spelling or writing. Even my little sister Mildred could communicate with me more easily. Language had opened the door to shared understanding and joy. Through this learning, I discovered the value of patience and effort. Every new word, every sentence, every book required practice. Sometimes I made mistakes, but I learned to persevere. Anne Sullivan taught me that learning is a journey, not a race. Knowledge grows step by step, like a tree reaching for sunlight. One of the most important lessons I learned was the power of curiosity. I realized that the more I asked, the more I could discover. Questions became a way to explore the unknown. Even if I could not see or hear, I could imagine, understand, and learn. Curiosity became my guide, leading me from one discovery to the next. As I learned about the world, I also learned about myself. I discovered that I could think, imagine, and reason like anyone else. I realized that my disability did not limit my mind. I could explore, create, and share ideas. I could be a part of the world, even if my eyes and ears did not function like other children's. Learning about the world through language was exhilarating. I felt alive, connected, and full of wonder. Every day brought new words, new ideas, and new opportunities to understand. I was no longer trapped in darkness or silence. The world was open to me, and I could explore it with my hands, my mind, and the guidance of Anne Sullivan. Through these lessons, I began to understand that education was not just about knowing facts. It was about understanding life, connecting with others, and discovering one's own abilities. Words had given me freedom, knowledge, and hope. They had opened the door to the world, and I was walking through it with courage and curiosity. The journey was far from over, but I felt confident. With Anne by my side and language in my hands, I could explore, learn, and grow. The world was no longer a dark, silent place. It was full of ideas, beauty, and endless possibilities. By the time I had learned to read, write, and communicate with my hands, learning itself had become a source of joy. Every day brought new discoveries, new words, and new ideas. I realized that knowledge was not just something to be collected. It was something to live, to feel, and to share. Anne Sullivan continued to guide me with patience and care. She introduced me to more books, stories, and lessons. Each book was like a doorway to a new world. I felt the raised letters under my fingers and imagined the stories unfolding around me. I could picture the characters, imagine their voices, and sense their emotions. Though I could not see or hear, I was fully part of their worlds. One of the most exciting parts of learning was writing. Through writing, I could express my thoughts and feelings. I could describe the garden, tell stories about my family, and even create imaginary worlds. Every sentence I wrote was a small victory, a way to share my mind with others. I began to understand the power of words, how they could communicate ideas, emotions, and imagination. At home, learning became a shared joy. My mother would help me spell new words, my father would ask questions, and my sister Mildred would join in with her own curiosity. Together we explored the world through letters and words. Every conversation, every note, every story became a celebration of knowledge and connection. Learning also taught me patience and perseverance. Sometimes a word or concept was difficult to understand. Sometimes I made mistakes in writing or spelling, but Anne taught me that mistakes were not failures. They were opportunities to try again, to practice, and to grow. I learned that persistence was the key to success, and that every small effort mattered. I also discovered that learning was not just about books or letters. It was about understanding life, nature, and people. I explored the garden, feeling the petals, leaves, and soil. I imagined the movement of animals and the flow of water. I read about faraway lands and historical events. Language gave me the power to connect with the world in ways I had never thought possible. One of my greatest joys was the freedom that knowledge brought. Before learning, I had been trapped in silence and darkness. Now I could communicate, imagine, and participate in life. Words had become my wings. They allowed me to explore ideas, express feelings, and connect with others. I felt independent, capable, and full of hope for the future. Anne encouraged me to ask questions and seek answers. She showed me that learning was a journey without limits. I could always explore more, discover more, and understand more. Curiosity became my guide. I learned to wonder about everything, from the stars in the sky to the stories of people long ago. Each question was a doorway, and each answer was a step forward. Through learning, I also discovered the importance of gratitude and humility. I knew that I could not have achieved so much without Anne's guidance, my family's love, and my own determination. Every book I read, every word I learned, was a gift. I learned to value education, patience, and the joy of discovery. The joy of learning was not only personal, it was also a way to connect with others. Through words, I could share my thoughts, tell stories, and participate in conversations. I realized that knowledge was a bridge, connecting people, ideas, and hearts. I felt a sense of belonging and community, even in a world that had once felt so lonely. As I continued my studies, I became more confident in my abilities. I knew that obstacles could be overcome with effort and guidance. I understood that learning was a lifelong adventure, full of surprises, challenges, and joys. Each new book, each new lesson, each new word brought excitement and wonder. By the end of this chapter of my life, I had discovered something truly extraordinary. The world is full of knowledge, and learning is one of the greatest joys we can experience. Words are more than symbols. They are keys to understanding, freedom, and connection. Through learning, we can explore, imagine, and share our lives with others. The joy of learning became my companion, my motivation, and my inspiration. It gave me the courage to face challenges, the curiosity to explore the unknown, and the hope to dream beyond what I could see or hear. Every day was a celebration of knowledge, a journey into understanding, and a step toward a life full of light and possibility. And so, with Anne Sullivan by my side and language in my hands, I continued to grow, to explore, and to embrace the endless adventure of learning. The door to the world had been opened, and I was walking through it with wonder, courage, and joy. Chapter 11. School Life begins. Going to school for the first time was both exciting and frightening. I had learned so much at home with Anne Sullivan, but the world outside was new and full of unknowns. The Perkins Institute for the Blind welcomed me with open arms, and I felt a mixture of curiosity, hope, and nervousness. Anne guided me every step of the way. The classrooms were different, full of children who had their own methods of learning. Some were blind, some were deaf, and some were like me. At first it was overwhelming. I had to learn new routines, meet new teachers, and follow rules I had never experienced. But I soon discovered the joy of learning with others. Lessons were structured, but they were also filled with opportunities for exploration. I practiced fingerspelling with my classmates, learning new words and phrases. I read books in raised letters and wrote sentences that I could share with the teachers. Each day was a new adventure, a step further into the world of knowledge. Anne was always by my side. She encouraged me to participate, helped me understand instructions, and celebrated my successes. Sometimes I struggled to keep up, and sometimes I felt frustrated, but every challenge became a chance to learn. My classmates were kind and curious, and together we created a community of learners who supported one another. School life taught me more than letters and words. It taught me discipline, responsibility, and independence. I had to follow schedules, complete tasks, and manage my own learning. I learned that effort mattered, that practice was essential, and that learning was a lifelong adventure. Through school, I also began to understand the value of collaboration. I could share ideas, ask questions, and listen with my hands to the stories of others. Learning became not just about personal achievement, but about connecting with people and contributing to a community. By the end of the first term, I felt confident and proud. I had discovered that school was a place of growth, friendship, and discovery. I knew that with Anne's guidance and my own determination, I could continue to explore, learn, and succeed. Chapter 12. Friends and Lessons. Making friends at school was a new experience for me. I had spent most of my early years in isolation, and now I was surrounded by children who were learning just like me. Some were blind, some deaf, and some had other challenges, but we all shared the desire to learn and connect. My first friends were patient and kind. They showed me their ways of learning, and I taught them mine. We fingerspelled words to each other, shared books, and explored the classroom together. Slowly, I realized that friendship was not just about words or sounds. It was about understanding, trust, and shared experiences. Anne continued to guide me through social interactions. She helped me understand gestures, facial expressions, and the emotions of others. I learned to recognize joy, sadness, and kindness in my friends. These lessons were as important as reading and writing, for they taught me how to be part of a community. In class, I learned new subjects every day. Mathematics, history, geography, and literature became part of my life. At first, some lessons were difficult. I had to work hard to understand concepts that other children could see or hear, but Anne helped me break each lesson into small, manageable steps. Slowly, I mastered the subjects, discovering that effort and patience could overcome any obstacle. Friendship also taught me empathy. I began to understand that everyone has their struggles, and that kindness and support can make a difference. I learned to listen, to help, and to share. These lessons shaped not only my mind, but also my heart. School life was now filled with both knowledge and joy. I looked forward to each day, eager to learn, to read, and to share stories. I discovered that learning was not just an individual journey, but a shared adventure. With friends by my side and Anne guiding me, every day brought growth, happiness, and a sense of belonging. Through these experiences, I realized that education is not only about information, but about connection with teachers, friends, and the world. The lessons I learned at school would stay with me forever, shaping my understanding of knowledge, compassion, and life itself. After I had become comfortable with fingerspelling and raised letter books, Anne Sullivan introduced me to a new and exciting way of reading: Braille. At first I did not know what to expect. The system seemed complex, and I wondered if I could ever master it. But Anne's patience and encouragement gave me the courage to try. Braille is made up of patterns of raised dots, each representing letters and numbers. By moving my fingers carefully over the dots, I could feel the letters and understand the words they formed. It was a completely new way of experiencing language, one that allowed me to read faster and more independently than before. Anne began by teaching me the alphabet in Braille. She guided my fingers over each letter, spelling it into my hand as she did so. At first it was slow and confusing. My fingers would miss dots or slide over them too quickly, but with practice, I began to recognize the patterns and connect them with the words I already knew from raised letter books and finger spelling. The first word I read in Braille was water. I remembered the water pump, the miracle that had opened my mind to language. Feeling those raised dots under my fingers, I realized that Braille would allow me to read independently, without needing Anne to spell every word into my hand. The feeling was like holding a new key to the world, one that opened doors I had only imagined before. Anne continued to teach me patiently. We practiced every day, moving from letters to simple words and then to sentences. I learned punctuation marks, numbers, and eventually longer passages. Braille became a tool not only for reading stories, but also for understanding ideas, history, and knowledge in ways that were faster and more precise than fingerspelling alone. Reading Braille was more than a practical skill. It was a source of pride and confidence. For the first time, I could read books entirely on my own. I could follow stories, explore ideas, and even study complex subjects independently. Each page I read strengthened my mind and imagination, opening new avenues of understanding. Anne also showed me that Braille could be used for writing. By using a special slate and stylus, I could create my own raised letters and words. This meant I could write notes, letters, and even stories that others could read. Writing in Braille gave me a sense of independence and power I had never felt before. Through Braille, I discovered the joy of books. I could explore stories of adventure, science, history, and poetry. Each book became a friend, a guide, and a teacher. I felt as though I was traveling through the world, experiencing people, places, and ideas that I had never imagined. Braille transformed reading into a personal, private journey that was entirely my own. Learning Braille also taught me perseverance. At times, the dots felt confusing, and my fingers struggled to recognize the patterns. I grew frustrated and wanted to give up, but Anne reminded me that every challenge was an opportunity to improve. With patience and practice, I slowly became fluent. I learned that no difficulty was too great to overcome with determination and guidance. At home, my family watched in amazement. They were thrilled to see me reading independently. My mother would ask questions, and I could answer them directly from the books. My father smiled quietly, proud of my progress. Even my sister, Mildred, enjoyed listening to me read aloud by spelling the words into her hand. Braille allowed me to become more self-sufficient and confident in my abilities. Through Braille, I realized that education could never be limited by disability. My inability to see or hear did not prevent me from exploring ideas, gaining knowledge, and expressing myself. Every new word I read strengthened my mind and deepened my understanding of the world. Braille became more than a tool. It became a companion. It allowed me to explore independently, learn continuously, and connect with ideas far beyond my immediate surroundings. Each book, each page, each word opened a new world for me, full of knowledge, imagination, and joy. Learning to read Braille was a turning point in my life. It gave me freedom, independence, and the ability to explore without limits. It showed me that obstacles could be overcome, and that determination, guidance, and patience could transform even the most challenging situations. With Braille in my hands, I felt unstoppable. I could read, learn, and imagine freely. The world of knowledge was no longer distant or inaccessible. It was within my reach, waiting for me to explore, discover, and understand. And so, with Anne Sullivan's guidance and Braille at my fingertips, I continued my journey of learning, ready to embrace the vast and wonderful world that lay ahead. After learning Braille, I discovered a whole new world through books. Each book I read became a friend, a teacher, and a window into life beyond my home. The first books I loved were simple stories, full of imagination and lessons, but even their simplest words carried incredible joy and meaning for me. Anne Sullivan guided me to books that would capture my interest. She encouraged me to explore stories about children, families, animals, and adventures. With my fingers tracing the raised dots, I could feel the words come alive. I began to imagine the characters, their voices, their actions, and the world around them. Even though I could not see or hear, I experienced the stories fully through language and imagination. One of the first books I truly loved was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I could feel the personalities of the March sisters in every word. I imagined Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, as if they were real people sitting beside me. Their joys, struggles, and triumphs felt close to my heart. I learned about love, kindness, courage, and family, lessons I carried with me every day. Another book I adored was Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Though the language was sometimes difficult, I felt inspired by the journey of the main character. I imagined the paths, the obstacles, and the triumphs. The story taught me perseverance, faith, and the importance of following a path of learning and moral strength. I realized that stories could teach lessons beyond words, guiding me in understanding life itself. Reading also introduced me to poetry, which became one of my great joys. Poems allowed me to feel the rhythm and beauty of language. I loved the way words could paint pictures in my mind, describe emotions, and express thoughts that were sometimes hard to say aloud. Through poetry, I learned that words could be art, music, and inspiration all at once. Books gave me a sense of independence. Before, I had relied on Anne to spell words into my hand, to guide me through language, and to teach me about the world. With Braille, I could read alone, explore at my own pace, and discover new stories without waiting for someone else to guide me. I felt a sense of freedom and confidence that was exhilarating. I also learned about the power of imagination. Reading stories allowed me to travel to places I had never been, meet people I would never see, and experience adventures that were impossible in my daily life. Imagination became a companion, teaching me creativity, curiosity, and the joy of exploring new ideas. At home, my family shared in my excitement. I would describe the stories to my mother and father, spelling the words into their hands or reading aloud through finger spelling. We laughed, imagined, and learned together. My sister Mildred also joined in, enjoying the stories and learning along with me. Books had become a bridge connecting all of us, deepening our love and understanding for each other. Reading my first books also taught me discipline. Each page required careful attention, patience, and focus. I learned to move my fingers slowly over the raised dots, understand each word, and connect them into sentences and stories. Though it was challenging at times, I loved the effort because it led to discovery, joy, and knowledge. Through these first books, I realized that reading was more than understanding words. It was understanding life, people, and ideas. Stories taught me lessons about kindness, courage, friendship, and perseverance. They allowed me to see the world beyond my home and beyond my limitations. Books became my teachers and companions. They gave me courage when I was frustrated, joy when I was lonely, and knowledge when I was curious. They taught me that learning and imagination could transform life, making it rich, full, and meaningful. The first books I loved shaped not only my understanding, but also my character. They inspired me to dream, to learn, and to explore. They showed me that even in a world without sight or sound, imagination and knowledge could create a universe full of light and color in the mind. Through my love of books, I discovered a lifelong passion for reading and learning. Each story I read became a treasure, a lesson, and a doorway to something new. I knew that my journey had only just begun, and that countless books and lessons awaited me in the years to come. And so, with Anne Sullivan guiding me in Braille in my hands, I continued to explore the worlds of imagination, knowledge, and understanding. The first books I loved had opened the door to a lifelong adventure. The adventure of learning, discovering, and living fully, even in silence and darkness. As I grew older, learning was not the only joy in my life. Holidays and travel brought new experiences, excitement, and the chance to explore the world beyond my home and school. Even though I could not see or hear, every journey taught me something new and unforgettable. Our family holidays were special occasions. I could feel the change in the air, the excitement of packing, and the anticipation of adventure. Anne Sullivan always accompanied me, guiding me with gentle hands and patient instruction. Each trip was an opportunity to experience the world, meet new people, and learn from different environments. The first trips were simple. We visited nearby towns, spent time in gardens, or walked through markets. Even the smallest experiences became lessons. I could feel the cobblestones under my feet, smell the flowers in bloom, and sense the bustling energy of townspeople. Anne helped me understand these experiences by spelling words and stories into my hand, connecting everything I felt with language and meaning. Travel also taught me patience and adaptability. Every place was new and unfamiliar. I had to learn new routes, navigate unknown spaces, and adjust to different routines. At first it was challenging, but I discovered that patience, careful observation, and guidance could help me enjoy each journey fully. Each step became a lesson in independence and confidence. One of the most memorable journeys was a trip to the countryside. The air was fresher, the sounds softer, and the environment filled with textures, scents, and sensations I had never fully experienced. I could feel the grass under my hands, the bark of trees, and the softness of flowers. I could imagine the gentle flow of rivers and the wide open spaces around me. Through words and touch, the countryside became a vivid world I could explore and enjoy. I also met new people during my travels. Visitors, neighbors, and guides shared stories and experiences. I could understand them through finger spelling and braille notes, learning about different lives, cultures, and ideas. Travel taught me that the world was full of diversity and beauty, and that knowledge could be found everywhere if one was curious and open-minded. Holidays were not only for travel, but also for learning new skills and interests. I spent time writing letters, reading books, and practicing Braille wherever I went. Even when the surroundings changed, my learning continued. Each experience added to my understanding, and each journey became a classroom of its own. Through travel, I discovered that the world was much larger and richer than I had imagined. I felt a sense of connection with nature, people, and ideas that expanded my understanding of life. Even without sight or sound, I could experience joy, wonder, and curiosity in every place I visited. Travel also strengthened my relationship with Anne. She was not just my teacher, but my guide, companion, and friend. Every journey we shared was filled with learning, discovery, and laughter. She taught me how to explore safely, how to ask questions, and how to find meaning in every new experience. I learned that holidays and travel could be more than relaxation. They were opportunities for growth. Each trip taught me new words, new concepts, and new perspectives. They reminded me that learning is everywhere, not just in classrooms or books. The world itself is a teacher, waiting to be explored. One important lesson from travel was courage. Every new place was an adventure that required bravery. I had to trust Anne, rely on my senses, and step into the unknown. Each journey, no matter how small, taught me that courage is essential to discovery, and that new experiences can bring joy and understanding. Through holidays and travel, I also learned the importance of observation. Even without sight or hearing, I could feel details, the texture of objects, the temperature of the air, and the movement of nature. Each sensation became a lesson, and every experience became part of my growing knowledge of the world. Travel opened my mind to ideas I could not have learned at home. I read books inspired by the places I visited, connected new words to real experiences, and understood concepts more deeply. It was a blend of imagination and reality, learning and adventure, that made each journey meaningful. By the end of my first years of travel, I felt enriched, confident, and curious. I realized that the world, with all its variety and beauty, was accessible to anyone who approached it with curiosity, patience, and an open heart. Holidays and travel were more than moments of pleasure. They were lessons in life, courage, and understanding. And so, with Anne Sullivan guiding me and my own curiosity leading the way, I continued to explore the world, discovering its wonders, learning its lessons, and embracing the adventure of life beyond home and school. Every journey became a memory, a classroom, and a story that I would carry with me forever. As I continued my journey of learning and exploration, one of the most exciting experiences was meeting new people. Every person I met had a story, knowledge, and perspective that expanded my understanding of the world. Though I could not see or hear, language and touch became my windows into their lives. Anne Sullivan guided me through these interactions with patience and care. She would introduce me to new individuals, spelling their names and words into my hand. At first, meeting strangers could feel overwhelming, but I soon realized that every encounter was an opportunity to learn, connect, and grow. I met teachers, students, friends, and visitors from near and far. Each person brought a different experience, perspective, and lesson. Through finger spelling, braille, and written notes, I could communicate with them, asking questions, sharing thoughts, and learning from their stories. Every conversation opened doors to new ideas and understanding. One of the most important lessons I learned was patience. People spoke at different speeds, used different expressions, and sometimes repeated words in ways that were confusing. I had to take my time, focus, and carefully interpret each word and gesture. This patience not only improved my understanding of language, but also taught me the value of empathy and careful listening. Friendship became another gift from meeting new people. I discovered that even in a world without sight or sound, friendships could flourish through shared experiences, understanding, and kindness. My classmates, neighbors, and even strangers became friends, teaching me lessons about trust, loyalty, and compassion. I also realized that every person had knowledge to share. I met people who were skilled in music, literature, science, and art. I learned from their expertise, exploring subjects I had never studied before. Even though I could not hear music or see paintings, I could imagine them through descriptions, braille notes, and conversations. Each person became a guide to a new world of ideas and creativity. Traveling introduced me to people from different cultures and regions. I learned new words, customs, and ways of thinking. I discovered that the world is vast and diverse, filled with ideas and experiences that are waiting to be shared. These encounters taught me openness, curiosity, and respect for differences. Meeting new people also strengthened my communication skills. I learned to express myself clearly, to ask meaningful questions, and to describe my thoughts and feelings in ways others could understand. Every interaction was a lesson in clarity, patience, and empathy. I began to understand that human connections are one of the greatest teachers. People can inspire, guide, and challenge us. Through conversations and shared experiences, I learned lessons about life, courage, creativity, and perseverance that no book could teach alone. Anne Sullivan played a crucial role in helping me navigate social interactions. She taught me how to read gestures, understand emotions, and respond appropriately. I learned to recognize happiness, concern, curiosity, and kindness in the people around me. These lessons shaped my understanding of human nature and helped me build meaningful relationships. One particularly memorable experience was meeting a group of children at a school for the blind. We exchanged stories, played simple games, and learned from each other's experiences. Though we could not speak in the usual way, we connected through touch, language, and imagination. It was a joyful reminder that friendship and learning transcend barriers. Through these encounters, I realized the importance of respect and humility. Every person has something to teach, and every interaction is an opportunity to grow. I learned to listen carefully, to observe thoughtfully, and to value the knowledge and experiences of others. Meeting new people also inspired me to dream about the future. I saw examples of courage, talent, and creativity in everyone I met. I realized that despite my disabilities, I could contribute to the world, share my ideas, and continue to learn and grow. These experiences taught me that connection is as important as knowledge. Learning from books is essential, but learning from people is equally vital. Each person we meet adds richness, depth, and understanding to our lives. Human interaction is a classroom without walls, full of lessons, surprises, and inspiration. By the end of these experiences, I felt confident, curious, and open-hearted. I understood that meeting new people is not just about socializing. It is about discovery, learning, and growing as a person. Each interaction became a story, a lesson, and a memory that shaped my journey. And so, with Anne Sullivan guiding me, and a world of people ready to share their experiences, I continued my journey of learning, connection, and understanding. Every new face was a teacher, and every conversation was an adventure in discovery, expanding my mind and heart in ways I had never imagined. As I grew older, I realized that learning was not only about reading, writing, or meeting people. It was also about developing practical skills that would allow me to navigate the world independently and creatively. Every new skill I learned became another tool to explore life, express myself, and gain confidence. Anne Sullivan encouraged me to try new things, even when they seemed difficult or unfamiliar. She taught me to sew, to cook, and to handle simple household tasks. At first, these activities were challenging. My hands had to learn movements they had never made before, but with patience, practice, and guidance, I gradually became capable and even confident in performing these tasks. Sewing was one of the first skills I truly enjoyed. I learned to thread a needle, make stitches, and follow patterns. At first, my fingers fumbled, and the thread often tangled, but Anne showed me how to focus, feel each movement, and practice until it became easier. Soon I could create small pieces of clothing and even repair items at home. Sewing taught me patience, precision, and the satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. Cooking was another important skill. I learned to measure ingredients, mix, stir, and understand the texture and smell of food. Every meal became a lesson in observation, practice, and creativity. Cooking taught me to be self-sufficient, careful, and attentive to details. I realized that practical skills could be just as rewarding as reading or writing. I also learned to play musical instruments by touch and vibration. Though I could not hear, I felt the rhythm and movement of the notes. Music became a source of joy and creativity, allowing me to experience patterns, emotions, and expression in a new way. Anne guided me carefully, helping me understand the structure and feeling of each piece. Music was not only a skill, but a language of its own, one I could explore through touch and imagination. Through these activities, I discovered the importance of persistence. Every new skill required practice, mistakes, and repeated effort. I learned that frustration is part of learning, and that the satisfaction of mastery is worth every challenge. Anne often reminded me, "Helen, every small step is progress. Keep going." Those words encouraged me to persevere, and I began to see progress in every skill I learned. Learning new skills also taught me independence. I realized that I could do more than I had ever imagined. I could sew, cook, and handle tasks that allowed me to participate in daily life without constant assistance. This independence gave me confidence and pride, and it strengthened my belief in my own abilities. I also began to understand the connection between different types of learning. Reading and writing helped me understand instructions for sewing or cooking. Finger spelling and braille allowed me to learn new techniques from books and teachers. Every skill built on the knowledge I had gained before, creating a chain of growth and understanding. Creativity became another important part of learning new skills. I could design patterns in sewing, create new recipes in cooking, and imagine new ways to express ideas through tactile experiences. Creativity allowed me to make learning my own, to adapt skills to my needs, and to enjoy the process as much as the result. I also discovered the importance of observation. Even without sight or hearing, I could notice details through touch, smell, and movement. Feeling the texture of fabric, the consistency of dough, or the vibration of musical notes taught me to be attentive, careful, and mindful. Observation became a powerful tool that enhanced almost every skill I practiced. Learning new skills also strengthened my connection with Anne. She was not just a teacher, but a guide and partner in every activity. We shared laughter, challenges, and triumphs as I learned. Her patience, encouragement, and belief in my abilities gave me confidence and joy in every new task. Through these experiences, I realized that life is full of skills waiting to be learned. Knowledge alone is not enough. Practical abilities, creativity, and persistence are equally important. Learning new skills allows us to explore the world more fully, to express ourselves, and to become independent and confident individuals. By the end of these lessons, I felt empowered, capable, and motivated to continue learning. Every skill I mastered was a step towards self-sufficiency, creativity, and joy. I understood that learning is a lifelong journey, and that each new skill opens doors to new experiences, opportunities, and understanding. And so, with Anne Sullivan guiding me and my own determination leading the way, I continued to explore, practice, and master new skills. Each day became a chance to grow, create, and discover the many ways life could be experienced, even in silence and darkness. As I grew more confident in reading and learning, I discovered a new and powerful way to express myself, writing my own thoughts. Writing became a bridge between my mind and the world, allowing me to share ideas, feelings, and stories in ways that were deeply personal and meaningful. Anne Sullivan encouraged me to write every day. She provided me with notebooks, braille slates, and pencils, and guided my fingers as I spelled words and formed sentences. At first, writing was slow and challenging. My hands needed to learn the precise movements for each letter, and I had to concentrate carefully to spell words correctly. But with practice, writing became easier and more enjoyable. The first words I wrote were simple, thoughts about my day, the garden, and the people I loved. I described the warmth of the sun, the fragrance of flowers, and the gentle touch of my family's hands. Through writing, I could capture experiences that were invisible to the eye or ear, preserving them in a way that could be shared with others. As my confidence grew, I began writing longer passages. I wrote about my feelings, dreams, and reflections. Writing became a mirror of my mind, helping me understand myself more deeply. I could explore my thoughts, organize ideas, and communicate experiences that might otherwise remain hidden. Anne guided me in refining my writing. She corrected mistakes gently, suggested better ways to express ideas, and encouraged me to develop a clear and expressive style. Through her guidance, I learned that writing is not just about words. It is about clarity, emotion, and connection. Every sentence could carry meaning, tell a story, and reach the heart of the reader. Writing also became a tool for learning. I wrote letters to my family and friends, spelling each word carefully into their hands. These letters allowed me to communicate independently, share stories, and strengthen bonds. I realized that writing could connect me to others in ways that language alone sometimes could not. Through writing, I discovered the power of imagination. I created stories about adventures, faraway lands, and imaginary friends. I wrote poems that captured feelings I could not say aloud. Writing allowed me to explore ideas freely, express emotions, and transform experiences into words that could live beyond the moment. I also learned that writing is a process of patience and persistence. At times, words did not come easily. Sentences needed revision, and ideas required reflection. But I discovered that careful thought, effort, and persistence could create writing that was both meaningful and beautiful. Anne reminded me that the joy is in the process as much as in the finished work. Through writing, I discovered the importance of self-expression. Even in a world without sight or sound, I could share my mind, my feelings, and my ideas. Writing gave me independence, freedom, and a voice that others could understand. It became a powerful way to participate in life and contribute to the world. I also realized that writing could be a form of learning. By organizing thoughts, exploring ideas, and reflecting on experiences, I deepened my understanding of life, language, and myself. Writing became a companion to reading, study, and exploration, a way to capture knowledge and turn it into something personal and meaningful. My family and friends were delighted to read my writing. They could feel my thoughts, share in my imagination, and understand my experiences. Writing strengthened my relationships, allowed me to connect deeply with others, and gave my ideas a lasting presence. Over time, I began to write with greater creativity and confidence. I explored topics I loved, expressed emotions I felt, and created stories that transported both myself and my readers. Writing became a joyful adventure, one that blended imagination, knowledge, and personal reflection. Through this process, I understood that writing is a gift, a way to communicate, explore, and leave a mark on the world. It allows us to share experiences, preserve memories, and inspire others. For me, writing became a way to transform silence into expression, darkness into understanding, and limitation into possibility. By the end of this period, I felt that writing was not just a skill, but a companion, a friend, and a bridge to the world. It gave me confidence, independence, and the ability to explore my thoughts freely. Every word I wrote was a victory, every sentence a connection, and every story a journey. And so, with Anne Sullivan's patient guidance and my own determination, I continued to write, reflect, and share my thoughts. Writing became an essential part of my life, a source of joy, discovery, and expression that would stay with me forever. As I grew older and continued my journey of learning, I began to think more about the future, my dreams, goals, and the person I wanted to become. Even though I lived in a world without sight or sound, my mind was full of possibilities. I realized that limitations of the body did not mean limits for the mind or the spirit. Anne Sullivan encouraged me to dream big. She told me that learning, persistence, and courage could help me achieve almost anything. Her guidance reminded me that obstacles were challenges to overcome, not barriers to success. With her support, I began imagining the life I wanted, setting goals, and believing that my aspirations were within reach. One of my earliest dreams was to continue learning, no matter what difficulties I faced. I wanted to read more books, write more stories, and explore ideas that had never been available to me before. I longed to understand the world deeply, and to share my knowledge and experiences with others. Learning became both a passion and a purpose, guiding my daily efforts and fueling my imagination. Education was central to my aspirations. I dreamed of attending college, studying literature, philosophy, and history, and developing a mind that could engage with the world. Even though others sometimes doubted my abilities, I believed that with effort, determination, and guidance from Anne, I could achieve my educational goals. Every lesson, every book, every skill I learned became a stepping stone toward these dreams. I also dreamed of writing and sharing my life with others. I wanted to show the world that disabilities did not define a person's potential. Writing became a way to express my thoughts, communicate my experiences, and inspire others. I hoped that my stories could encourage people to pursue learning, face challenges with courage, and believe in the power of determination. Friendship and human connection were another part of my aspirations. I wanted to meet people from different backgrounds, learn from them, and contribute positively to their lives. I believed that understanding, kindness, and empathy were essential qualities to cultivate. My goal was not only to learn for myself, but to make a difference in the lives of others, creating bonds that transcended barriers. I also dreamed of independence. Learning practical skills, reading Braille, writing, and navigating the world gave me confidence. I wanted to rely on my own abilities as much as possible, to participate in life fully, and to pursue opportunities without hesitation. Independence was both a practical goal and a source of personal pride. Creativity and imagination became part of my aspirations as well. I wanted to explore the arts, write creatively, and imagine worlds beyond my own experiences. Through literature, poetry, and storytelling, I realized that the mind could travel anywhere, create anything, and inspire others. Imagination became a companion that encouraged me to dream even bigger. I knew that achieving my dreams would require perseverance. There would be obstacles, moments of doubt, and challenges that tested my patience. But I also understood that determination, effort, and a positive mindset could overcome difficulties. Anne often reminded me that every step forward, no matter how small, brought me closer to my goals. Through reflection, I realized that my dreams were not just personal. They were meaningful. I wanted to inspire others, to demonstrate that courage and determination could transform lives. I wanted to show that disabilities were not weaknesses but challenges to overcome with learning, effort, and hope. My aspirations became a mission to live fully and contribute positively to the world. I also dreamed about the simple joys of life: friendship, laughter, exploration, and discovery. These were as important as education and achievement. I wanted to experience life deeply, feel its richness, and share its wonders with others. Each moment, each relationship, and each new experience became part of my vision for a meaningful life. Looking to the future, I imagined the opportunities ahead: college, friendships, travel, writing, and teaching. All of these were within my reach if I remained committed to learning and growth. I understood that dreams are realized step by step, with patience, effort, and faith in oneself. Through my aspirations, I discovered hope and purpose. They gave me direction, motivation, and confidence. I learned that the mind and spirit could soar beyond physical limitations, and that every challenge, faced with determination, became a stepping stone to success. By the end of this chapter of my life, I felt inspired, determined, and full of hope. Dreams and aspirations gave me energy, courage, and focus. They reminded me that life, even in silence and darkness, could be full of possibilities, adventure, and accomplishment. And so, With Anne Sullivan guiding me and my own determination driving me, I continued to dream, plan, and pursue a life filled with learning, creativity, and meaningful contribution. My aspirations became a beacon, lighting the path toward a future I was determined to shape with courage, passion, and resilience. As I reached this stage of my journey, I often paused to reflect on the path I had traveled. Life had been filled with challenges, discoveries, learning, and growth. Though I had lived without sight and sound, I had learned to experience the world in ways that were rich, meaningful, and deeply rewarding. I thought about the early days when I felt trapped in silence and darkness. The frustration, confusion, and loneliness were heavy, but they also became the foundation for resilience, determination, and courage. I learned that even the most difficult challenges could be overcome with patience, guidance, and effort. These lessons shaped who I became and guided my steps in life. Anne Sullivan was the greatest gift of my life. Her patience, wisdom, and unwavering belief in my potential transformed everything. She opened the doors to language, reading, writing, and understanding. More than a teacher, she became my companion, my guide, and my inspiration. I am forever grateful for her love, dedication, and tireless efforts. I also reflected on my family, whose support, encouragement, and love nurtured my growth. My parents and sister believed in me, celebrated my successes, and comforted me in times of struggle. Their faith in my abilities gave me confidence and courage to pursue learning and life with determination. I realized that love and support are as powerful as education in shaping a life. The world of books became my constant companion. Reading and writing in Braille allowed me to explore ideas, stories, and knowledge far beyond my immediate surroundings. Books taught me lessons about life, courage, creativity, and imagination. Each story, poem, and lesson became a friend and teacher, enriching my understanding and inspiring me to dream. I thought about the people I met along the way. Friends, teachers, and strangers all contributed to my growth. Each encounter taught me lessons about kindness, patience, empathy, and understanding. I realized that human connection is one of the most important sources of learning and joy in life. Every person we meet has something valuable to share. Through my experiences, I discovered the importance of gratitude. Gratitude for guidance, for opportunities to learn, for friendships, and for the chance to grow. Gratitude helped me see the beauty and meaning in life, even in silence and darkness. It reminded me to appreciate small joys, lessons, and accomplishments every day. I also reflected on the power of perseverance. Learning to read, write, communicate, and live independently required effort, patience, and persistence. Every challenge I faced strengthened my resolve and taught me that determination could overcome obstacles. Life's difficulties became opportunities to learn, improve, and grow stronger. Education, curiosity, and imagination became guiding lights in my life. They taught me that knowledge is not limited to classrooms or teachers. It is everywhere. Every experience, book, conversation, and observation became part of my understanding of the world. I learned that learning is a lifelong journey, full of discovery, joy, and growth. I realized that my life was not defined by disability, but by my response to it. By embracing challenges, seeking knowledge, and pursuing dreams, I transformed limitations into opportunities. My experiences showed me that courage, effort, and hope can create a life full of meaning, learning, and contribution. Through reflection, I understood the importance of sharing my experiences. Writing about my journey allowed me to inspire others, demonstrate the power of perseverance, and show that obstacles can be overcome with determination. Sharing knowledge and stories became a way to connect, teach, and encourage those facing difficulties of their own. Gratitude also extended to the beauty and wonder of the world. Nature, books, friendships, and human kindness became sources of joy and inspiration. Even without sight or sound, I could experience these wonders through touch, imagination, and understanding. Life revealed its richness in ways I had never imagined. I thought about my dreams and aspirations, and how far I had come. Each step forward, each skill learned, and each challenge overcome brought me closer to the person I wanted to become. Reflection helped me see progress, appreciate effort, and embrace the journey itself as meaningful and rewarding. Ultimately, I realized that life is a gift, and learning is its greatest treasure. Knowledge, creativity, perseverance, and gratitude create a path of fulfillment and joy. Through reflection, I could appreciate every moment, lesson, and relationship that had shaped me. Life, even in silence and darkness, could be vibrant, inspiring, and full of opportunity. And so, as I look back on my journey, I am filled with gratitude, hope, and joy. I am thankful for guidance, support, challenges, and opportunities to learn. I am inspired to continue exploring, learning, and sharing. My journey is a story of courage, determination, and the transformative power of education, love, and perseverance. With gratitude in my heart, I continue forward, ready to embrace new experiences, to learn more, and to inspire others through my journey. Every challenge, every lesson, and every step has been a treasure, shaping a life that is full, meaningful, and deeply rewarding. And so we reach the end of Helen Keller's remarkable journey, a story of courage, determination, and the power of learning. Through challenges, discoveries, and triumphs, Helen showed us that limitations are only what we make them, and that curiosity, perseverance, and hope can transform any life. We hope this adaptation has inspired you to dream, to explore, and to embrace the power of knowledge in your own life. Remember, every challenge is an opportunity, and every small step forward brings growth, understanding, and joy. Thank you for listening. This audiobook was produced for Oklistening, where we bring stories of inspiration, learning, and human courage to life. If you enjoyed this recording, please subscribe to Oklistening to hear more adaptations and journeys that will uplift, educate, and inspire.